So I just did a couple posts on role-playing the Fate system and different kinds of systems, and then I did two posts on the truisms of Divine Blood, which ended up being very existentialists and philosophical and probably turned off a couple people. Hopefully not. Any case, I'm going to go into some of the nitty-gritty stuff, not the mechanics, but the setting. Well, first, I'm going to go over the nations, the major nations of the world, some of the changes. You have the four major free world powers that's in Divine Blood. Are to simplify it would be the U.S., Egypt, China, North China, excuse me, and Australia. And it's a little bit different. Not what you're thinking, because the borders are different from the real world. Continental United States is pretty much normal, except for U.S. has two states in Asia as a result of World War II. Okinawa and Shandong on mainland China are United States territory. Most of China and most of the Southeast Asia was conquered by the Burmese coming out of World War II under MacArthur. Yeah. Though he probably died fairly soon after declaring his own empire. The Mongolians and the Northern Chinese created what is called the Cultural Republic of Chinese and Mongolian Peoples, which was a more or less socialist Chinese-Mongolian state, and they ended up being allied with the United States against the imperialist Burmese for decades. Also, Egypt isn't just Egypt, it's Libya, Egypt, a couple of other places. Where Israel would have been is in real life is still Palestine. Due to the manipulations of the British, the way the British handled things in the real world resulted in Israel and a couple of other situations. The way British handled things in Divine Blood resulted in what is called the North African Alliance. The North African Alliance is a lot of North Africa. It's not Saudi Arabia. It's not Iraq. It's not Iran. It's not Afghanistan. It's Syria, Jordan, Palestine, Egypt, Libya, Sudan, I think. I'd have to actually look at my list of and the little map that I do have. It's smaller than a lot of the others. It does have some oil-producing states, and it has a amount of influence in the Middle East. But it's one of the bigger superpowers in the world, despite having a very small area and being mostly landlocked because of the oil. And they would have a deal with the CRCMP, the Chinese, to get some of their stuff carted out from the Middle East to the Far East, like Shandong and Okinawa and Japan and Korea. And so that gave the CRCMP some money. It gave the American forces that were over there oil at a relatively cheap rate. So the U.S., the North African Alliance, and the CRCMP are fairly closely allied. And then there's Australia, which is more closely allied with the United States than the other two. It does a lot of trading with the CRCMP, but it's more separate. I mean, there's no Australian land right next to the CRCMP the way there's American land right next to the CRCMP, and they don't have a trading relationship with the NAAA. In fact, because of the rise in the use of nuclear power, Australia is starting to rise, while a lot of the petroleum-based income from some of the Middle East states is starting to fall. especially since there's talk about converting some civilian like civilian vessels into nuclear powered vessels, which would reduce the need for petroleum. The United States is pretty much as people remember it, except for the fact that McCarthyism wasn't anti-communism; it was anti-imperialism because of what MacArthur did. The Soviet Union was still a major enemy, but it was seen as an imperialist communism, as adverse to the Chinese socialism that was in this real world, as definitely not the sort of nastiness that has happened in China in the real world in the last 100 years. So America is very anti-imperialist, actually. They are currently in a war. It's not in the Middle East, it's in Europe. 9/11 happened as a result of Czech agents trying to put a nuclear bomb in New York. They failed to get a nuke there, but they managed to blow up the Trade Center. And that started a war between America and the Czechoslovakia, which has been ongoing and and then there was a war between West Germany and East Germany, where some East German rebels decided to they wanted to join up with West Germany and throw off the communism, and eventually West German East German conflict sucked in the United States. So the United States for the last 10 years, from 2001 to the current setting, has been in Eastern Europe fighting in Germany, Czechoslovakia, and some other places, but mostly Czechoslovakia and Germany. East Germany. West Germany is... Some of far West Germany is untouched, but it's mostly the fighting's going on in East Germany, with the Americans going in looking for places to shut down and operating out of bases from areas around, but not taking any land because they're anti-imperialist. They don't want to be seen as conquering. So it just keeps going on because they fall back. They don't keep the land, and people come back in. And Warsaw Pact, when the Soviet Union collapsed, it did not collapse nearly as stably as it did in the real world. It sort of fell to pieces, literally. Russia is not a coherent state. It is a land just full of warlords and independent villages. You think of the TV show Jericho, where America got bombed by a bunch of things, and you have Jericho as just this town in the middle of nowhere, and it's its own country basically now. That's the same thing that's happening in Russia. And in Eastern Europe, you have a lot of people trying to, in the Warsaw Pact, instead of opening up to the West and getting more freedom, you have people rushing to try to fill in the void that Russia left when its economics collapsed. And to add on to that, Russia still has its nuclear arsenal, but no one knows who's in control. So the Americans, the Egyptians, North Africans, whatever, and the Chinese have been periodically sending in agents to find Soviet nuclear silos and disarm as many nuclear weapons as they can before someone gets a hold of them that's crazy and launches one. Which is why Czechoslovakia sent people to go attack New York, because they objected to having American and Chinese and Egyptian agents poking around in their country. So that's some of the political situation. I've dealt with Warsaw Pact. I've dealt with a little bit of Burmese. Then you have Britain. Britain is sort of in a multiple personality disorder. There are aspects of the United Kingdom that want to go back to being a world empire. They're very heavily imperialist. There's an entire secret society within Britain devoted to returning Britain to being an empire. However, so this actually, as a part of this, Canada is still part of British. It's not. Canada is not an independent nation in Divine Blood. Likewise, Ireland is more firmly is still being held on, and there's still a lot of fighting going on between the IRA and the British there. Britain is not considered an ally of the United States after World War II. It was in World War II, but it's after World War II and after its activities in Middle East and other places, it's no longer considered a ally. It tried to keep Australia, but failed to. For one thing, the royal family had no problem with Australia going independent. It had no problem with other things, because Australia still considers the royal family of England the royal family. But Britain has some of the people in Britain have been seeing the empire fall apart over centuries. Most of them aren't that old enough to have seen it, but they want to go back to being a world empire instead of being this relative. They're not quite a superpower, not really a superpower anymore. Lost a lot of respect, a lot of influence. They want to go back to being the big boy on campus. The thing is, their citizens don't really care. And a lot of their politicians don't really care about imperialism. And the royal family doesn't care about being an empire anymore. They more care about Britain and what's happening in Britain, the citizens and all that. They don't care about conquering other places and becoming the biggest name on campus. They care about having good life and having a good economy and all that. So the imperialists in Britain are always trying to manipulate are working against their own civilians more than they are everybody else, because that's what's in their way right now. And then you have Brazil, which is the Nazis in Brazil thing, where you have the old story about the Nazis escaping to Brazil. It did happen in real life. It happens in Divine Blood. In fact, since the war lasted another year and a half because of different instances, more Nazis escaped to Brazil in Divine Blood than in the real world, and eventually Brazil became culturally became dominated by these Germans, these displaced Germans, and the official language became German. Probably not as many people speak German as Portuguese still, but the official language is German because that's who's in charge right now. Now, they have this thing where they went through a period where maybe they would go on to the Third Reich thing and all that, or maybe they would drop it because they had a sect of people that didn't want to go on with the World War II thing, but those groups lost. So you have the Thule Society and the trying to raise up another Nazi party in Brazil, and then go back to Europe and take over the fatherland and go back to cleansing the earth. Only now, they are the Thule Society and the Nazis in Brazil are aware of the gods and the demons and non-humans and all that, and they're less concerned with ethnically different humans and they are with getting rid of non-humans. So that's Brazil. Brazil's not a big part of the novels. They're pretty much biding their time. They might show up and do stuff later on when stuff really starts going bad and you have a worldwide problems going on. But Brazil's not a big focus on the novels. Burma's a big focus. Britain will probably end up being something of a focus just because of the backgrounds of some of the characters. And I'm about to hit my time limit, so I will stop there.